Welcome to July's meeting of the County Council Executive. Welcome to you all. I'm Councillor Martin Hill, for those online, Chairman of this committee. So without further ado, we'll move to item 1, please, which is apologies for absence.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Corey. We also have apologies from Andy Gutherson, Executive Director for Place, and Glenn Garrett, Executive Director for Adult Care and Community Wellbeing.
And Councillor Bradwell. Thank you. No more apologies. Then I'll move on to any declaration of councillors' interest. Please indicate. There are none indicated, so we'll take it there are none. Number 3, any announcements by leader, executive councillors or executive directors? Are there any? None so indicated, so we'll move on then to item 4, which are the minutes of the meeting of this executive, which was held on the 6th of June 2023. Are you agreed that these are a true and accurate record? That's agreed. Any dissent? No. Thank you. I will sign those as such. Okay, then we'll move on to item 5 then, which is the first substantive item, which is the Deeping School Leisure Centre. So Jane, as our head of property, will just give a brief report.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, everyone. So this report sets out a proposed direction of travel for the Deepings Leisure Centre following receipt of the building from South Kesteven District Council in January 2023. The recommended option has been carefully considered following an options appraisal exercise as detailed in section 2 of the report. The recommendation is to undertake an expression of interest exercise and seek a third-party provider to acquire the building, refurbish the building and reopen the leisure centre for community use. This option will be subject to the receipt of a viable and sustainable business case by an experienced and competent third party. It will enable the 1-to-5-year academy lease to be signed with the Academy Trust, which the Council has a statutory obligation to do so. And it will enable LCC to resolve all responsibilities and liabilities for the leisure centre building. It should be noted that this option will require full sign-off by the Department for Education. Should this recommendation fail to come to fruition, then the next recommended option will be demolition. Demolition will result in a cleared site to be transferred back to the Academy Trust and again will give us the ability to formalise the 1-to-5-year Academy lease with the Academy Trust and allow us to resolve all liabilities and responsibilities towards the leisure centre building. Just as a note, this option would not require DFE approval. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. This was extensively debated at the scrutiny meeting on last Thursday. So, Councillor Smith, I believe you are with us. Just we'd like to report yes. On, add to the circulated note, please. Thank you.
As you said, Leader, it was debated, and I believe you and Councillor Booter was there, so I won't read the note verbatim, but it was a very good debate. The report was very much welcomed by the board, and we hope that the executive will agree with the recommendations to see if we can get the centre back up and running through option 1, and if not, obviously, then the second option is there available to us if that's not a viable option.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, there were representatives, both councillors for the Deeping, county councillors for the Deepings were there, and a district councillor as well, who I believe is a chairman, I believe, of the local Friends of Deepings Leisure Centre. So I think it was a very positive meeting, and I think everybody was, we're all hopeful that a solution can be found that enables the leisure centre to be kept open. But I think, as Jane referred to, there are quite a few hurdles to cross, not least the issue of the Department for Education and the constraints of the issues around having academies, the academy school as well. So is there anything you wish to add, Councillor Betroyd?
I don't think so at this time. I think this is the first step on the journey, really. There's quite a few hurdles to get over before we find a third party or even reopen if that is the case. So I think this is a positive first step, and hopefully we can go from here. Thank you.
Thank you. I have had a conversation with the MP, Sir John Hayes, who's the MP for the Deepings, and if the executive agrees these recommendations, then he is prepared to convene a meeting of the interested parties to see if there is a solution to be found as well. So I think that is where, I think the one thing which quite resolved, but there were some issues about, I think the scrutiny committee were very keen that there needs to be a resolution and this issue doesn't drift on, because there's also the building, of course, is deteriorating as we speak. So I think in terms of, we had that discussion, I think there is a commitment. We would expect that resolution one way or the other of this issue by the end of the year, so that if unfortunately it is not possible for a group to come forward who are going to take on the running of this building long term, then we'll have to look at the unfortunate other option. But I'm hopeful that we'll get to a position where we'll have a good solution all round. So I think, Jane, we are looking at, you know, we need some firm answers by the end of the year, particularly from the DFE, who do need to probably a bit more speedy than they sometimes are. Okay, any further questions, comments? I think it was, yes, Councillor Woolley.
Thank you, Leader. Can I just double check with either yourself or Jane? You just mentioned a resolution and a timescale of by the end of the year. Do you mean the end of the calendar year, or do you mean the end of a financial year?
I think the issue is, I mean, obviously we're talking about the end of the calendar year, because obviously if unfortunately demolition has to take place, that can only really happen during holidays mostly. The main effort would have to be in the summer of school holidays of 2024. So to enable everybody to know, what we're doing, that's probably, Christmas is probably where we need to be confident that we have a solution in place.
Thank you. My second question was, and I think this is to Jane, who makes the decision on if there are a number of bidders that come forward, or indeed a number of proposals, who decides on whether those proposals are what the art of the possible, and whether a bid is good enough?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Woolley. I think it's a good question. I think it's really important to put the preparation work in the first place. So we'll be setting out together with our, obviously, property professionals at Kia, a bit of a criteria really in terms of what we'd be expecting from a third party in terms of them being able to come in and operate the building as a leisure centre. Obviously, you know, sat here we need experienced, competent operators to do that, because obviously it is a risk in terms of selling the leisure centre on with a potential operator. Therefore, we have to make sure that they're, as I said, they're experienced, they're competent, and they understand the workings of the building, etc. So it would be sort of a professional and technical overview from obviously property services, Kia, legal input as well, which is really important. You know, David Coleman's been really important in terms of getting this to the stage it's at. So it will be kind of a multidisciplinary group in order to make sure that we're getting the right solution for the property.
I think we also should be very clear here that what we can't do is, you know, I mean, there may be a request for funding from the council. We don't know yet. No commitment for that. But what we can't do is invest in this project and then find 3 years down the line that, you know, we're back in the same place. So I think the clear commitment, the clear expectation from the county council is we want to be supportive, maybe financially, but we must be able to just walk away from a very difficult situation, which is legally quite complicated, all due to the way the Academies Act was enacted by the government, which at the moment leaves the county council in a lose-lose situation. So I think, to me, that is the big question. So I suppose the issue will be, will somebody come forward and say, right, we'll take on the ultimate responsibility, if you like, if in case it all falls down, or the DFE and the school trust also are willing to be in a pragmatic place, shall we say. If that doesn't happen, unfortunately, the place will demolish, which none of us really want to see. Okay, any further questions, comments, please? Okay then, well, the recommendations are on page 11. So you'll see there are 6 of them, which basically we go out for expressions of interest, but also leave the option for demolition if, unfortunately, that becomes necessary. And then the delegation and the mechanism whereby we can proceed with this. So 6 recommendations there, please, all those in favour? I think that's unanimous, so that is passed. Thank you very much. So that's that one, thank you. So then we move on to substance misuse recommissioning. Councillor Bowcat, who's handing straight over to Lucy.
Good morning, Leader. Thank you very much. So our substance misuse services in Lincolnshire, they're specialist services that support people with a drug or alcohol problem to help them to reduce or stop their use, to remain drug or alcohol free, and also to provide support to their friends and family in looking after them. As all the current contracts that we have for treatment, recovery and family support expire on the 31st of March 2024, a recommissioning exercise is currently underway. And those 3 services, the treatment, the recovery service, which helps people to remain drug-free, and the family support services are all really important components of our system-wide prevention and treatment of drug and alcohol harm. In preparation for the recommissioning, pre-procurement work's been undertaken to look at how well the current model is performing, identify best practice, and also to explore alternative commissioning models. And conclusions from that work in the round have informed our future delivery model as set out in the paper. Whilst the current model has performed well, the recommissioning does offer the opportunity to apply some learning from the last 6 years, and the full list of areas for improvement are set out in the paper. The proposed budget for the new service is 5.472 million from the Public Health Grant, and that level of funding is built into the Public Health Medium-Term Financial Plan. And additionally, the service is supported by some supplemental national grant funding from the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities. That totals 2.2 million in the financial year 24-25. And we do expect that funding to continue for the next 7 to 8 years, but it is subject to the National Spending Review. Our eligibility for that national grant funding, that supplemental 2.2 million, is contingent on us as a local authority maintaining our own investment at the financial level it was in 21-22. Hence the recommendation to keep the budget at 5.472 million. So within the new model, we're looking to move from 3 contracts to 2. We will have 1 joint contract for treatment and recovery and a separate family support service. We'll be using the open procurement procedure and we'll build flexibility into the contract to make sure that we can flex as needed along the level of national grant funding that we are allocated. The proposal is for a 5-year initial contract period with an option to extend for a further 4 years, 2+2. And we are hoping to go out to tender in late July with the contract award expected in late November 2023. So we've asked that the Executive approves the recommendations as set out in the paper. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Smith. Again, this came on Thursday to scrutiny.
It was actually Councillor Marfleet's Leader, so it's been dropped on me rather last moment, so I'm not in a particular position to comment in anything other than you've received in your briefing note, unfortunately, Chairman.
Pretty straightforward. I think, Lucy, you've just probably because a little bit more expand on, I know it's 2 contracts instead of 3, but what are the main differences in terms of how we've commissioned this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the treatment and recovery contract is by far the largest contract that will provide wraparound treatment for anyone coming into the service who's got an identified drug and or alcohol problem, often combined. And it provides a whole range of treatment options as are needed by that individual, so psychological support, medication support, and we do also do assertive outreach within that treatment. So we will go out to people who, for example, are at risk of rough sleeping. We go out and do assertive outreach with women, for example, who often struggle to get into the service. So that's the treatment and recovery system. The recovery element of it is there to support people as they reach the end of their treatment journey once they are drug or alcohol free, to help them to rebuild their lives and to remain drug or alcohol free as they kind of reintegrate into their community. The family support service will be a standalone service. with a proposed value of 240,000, and that's a specialist service that will support friends and family of people who are using drugs or alcohol in a harmful way, to help them to look after themselves and provide support for them to look after their own health and well-being as substance misuse carers, but also to help them understand how they can best support their family member who is themselves going through treatment. So they're the two different elements.
Thank you very much for that. Questions, comments, please? Councillor Davey.
Thank you very much, Leader. Just a quick thought. Obviously, the paper covers how many service users we have in 21-22. I'm just wondering, is there any indication of increased pressure in terms of the period after pandemic, lockdowns, cost of living crisis? And obviously, the paper clearly details that for every £1 spent on treatment, we get a very good return on that money in terms of savings down the line. So, but I'm just wondering, is there any pressure in the system?
Yes, absolutely. We have actually just had the figures through for the 22-23 financial year, and we have seen an increase in the number of people we're supporting by around about 200. We are seeing an increase in people who need support, but the national supplemental grant funding has enabled us to significantly increase the capacity to support people within the service. So we've brought on board a number of staff through the last financial year who are now just at the point where they're fully trained and able to take on their own independent caseload. So what we'll be doing is both supporting people who come to the service and who were referred in from a number of different avenues, but also doing much more proactive getting out into communities, into different settings to try and encourage people who have got drug or alcohol problems into the service, because we know that there are lots of people out there with a need who, if we can get them into the service and stop and prevent them, kind of help them to stop drinking or stop using drugs, we'll see that good return on investment as well.
Thank you, Leader. It's also worth saying that I was on a webinar with the Minister yesterday, the Home Office Minister, because the work that we're doing in Lincolnshire is seen as national best practice, and we were talking about the model that we've got, very much building on the national government policy from Hope to Harm, the 10-year strategy, and the delivery model that we've articulated here, along with the additional monies that Lucy's just talked about, will give us that capacity to deal with what we do expect will come through. We are also seeing an increase in alcohol misuse. This isn't the only way that we help our communities who are maybe struggling with alcohol misuse, and we've talked previously about One New Lincolnshire on our integrated lifestyle model. That provides lower level support. This is really the specialist level, but we've got a whole range of different support out there for people who are experiencing challenges, given, as you've just said, the challenges with COVID and other things.
Just on, in terms of, and obviously it's a lot of interest, Prince of Wales is showing interest in homelessness. There doesn't seem to be much discussion about actually helping people to, go back to mainstream, and, because as we know, a lot of the homeless and the sleeping rough, a major factor is addiction in one description or the other. So I just wonder, in terms of this programme, how it will actually help people. Won't help everybody, but many people actually get back to normal and then rejoin society in a normal way.
Yeah, absolutely. We work really closely with a number of key partners across Lincolnshire. So with, for example, housing related support, and with and also with mental health services, because what we tend to see is a large number of people who use the specialist substance misuse service have co-occurring mental ill health challenges around homelessness, also around kind of financial challenge. So we work really closely with the districts, with Citizens Advice around that financial support to try and provide a wrap-around approach. Within the service, we have a specialist outreach team who do go out onto the streets and working, so trying to identify people who are rough sleeping, who we can support and bring into the service. So that assertive outreach, as we call it, is something that we've been increasing our capacity to deliver in recent months to make sure that we can identify and support people in the round.
What's sort of like the percentage rate of recovery, if I can put it like that?
So it does vary depending on how early someone comes into the service after they've perhaps developed a problem. For a lot of our alcohol clients, we do see around about a third of people entering the service, receiving treatment and getting to their end goal, so being abstinent, or vastly reducing their level of drinking within a year, so about a third. With opiates particularly, often people will stay in the service for longer because they will go on to methadone maintenance, for example, to help them reduce their use of opioids or stop the use of opioids, and that can be reduced over time. We have a small cohort of around 400 individuals who've been in the service for over 6 years, but they have really, really complex needs. And by keeping them in the service and supporting them, what we often enable them to do is to hold down jobs and houses and things like that. So they are the service is there, helping them to kind of remain integrated into society.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor McNally.
Thank you, Leader. Just one of the things that it sort of highlights is and when you talk about misuse and everything else, you sort of think it's adults and everything else, but you forget about the sort of children that it affects. It, but I mean, it is in the report. How many what percentage of the children that are with the substance misusers end up with the sort of the carers, the friends' carers, or in so I mean, it says 50% of the kinship carers have given up work, etc., etc. But how many of the children actually end up in that position of being with a carer?
Can I just confirm, so are you asking how many of our children and young people in the children's service would end up in care? Or
Right, so 3.7 of the children that live with an adult that misuses substances, and then some where is it? Where parents are unable to care for the child due to substance use, this responsibility then falls to the grandparents, kinship carers. I'm just asking how many actually end up in that position.
Low ball there, I have to say, Councillor McNally.
Thank you, Councillor McNally. So I don't have, I think what you're asking is, of the people who use this service, which of them end up needing to have kinship care providers? And I haven't got that data right now, and I don't think Lucy will have, but it's something that we can look at for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, anybody else? Are we done? Thank you. So recommendations are on page 26 there. Two of them, basically the approve the commissioning of the new contract as been described, and delegating the necessary arrangements to the director in consultation. All in favour of recommendation, please show. Again, I think unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you. Moving on then to back to property now. So we are dotting about a bit. So Jane, it's, well, unless Councillor Troyd wants to introduce it. Anything to say?
Thank you, Leader. If I can get the mic to work. Yeah, I mean, really pleased to be able to bring this paper. You know, this is the vision we have really for property, and we feel that these recommendations in this paper will go a long way to solving some of the frustrations and issues we've had with some of the way property services are delivered. So really happy to put this before the executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Boothroyd. So, yeah, this report, and I will keep it brief because it is quite a big report, this one. So this report sets out a direction of travel, I think as Councillor Boothroyd's already said, once the existing property services contract with Vinci and Kia terminates in March 2025. So it does seek to address some of the issues experienced within the current contract and within the client team as well. So it is looking to make us a little bit more responsive in some of the works that property undertake. Obviously, we always want to keep costs down, but also, I think more importantly, we want to strengthen the client team in its transition from a lean client to an intelligent client. So I'll just briefly talk you through the main changes just to highlight those. So we're proposing to move away from one overarching contract that covers facilities management, professional services, also known as projects, and estates and data. So the new approach will result in 2 separate contracts, one for FM, so facilities management, one for professional services, and estates and data will be insourced. So really quickly, just in terms of each area, just to give you a bit more of a flavour, with facilities management, the majority of the services will remain outsourced, with the exception of the environment and energy team, which is 2 full-time employees. We believe that insourcing this team will provide the council with additional capacity and experience to assist in our mission to meet the aims of our Green Master Plan. In addition, we're looking to strengthen our property compliance section by insourcing asbestos management, which is 2 full-time employees, but also through the creation of 3 new internal roles. So there will be fire management, Legionella management, and a minor works manager as well. So moving on to professional services, also known as our project delivery, we're proposing to insource a technical team of 7 full-time employees to ensure projects are delivered on time, within budget, to the expected quality that we expect. This team will work alongside a delivery partner via a professional services contract. And finally, we're proposing to insource the estate and data team. Insourcing will add further professional and technical expertise to the corporate property team, and will also add more assurance around our property transactions. And when we're talking about property transactions, we're looking at acquisitions, disposals, lease management, and valuations. So overall, that equates to 19 full-time employees being insourced against a total of 146 that are currently outsourced in the existing property services contract. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Leader. Again, there was a very full debate on this. I asked a number of questions which are in there, so I won't repeat those. But as Councillor Boucher has already said, this is, I think, the right way to go. It's a very good report. The one thing I will mention, Leader, that you mentioned is around the minor, especially the what I'd call the small jobs. This new contract will certainly enhance how those are dealt with, because I know there was a lot of debate and discussion around that at overview and scrutiny. And I think, as Councillor Boucher has already said, this is definitely the right way to go, and the report should be commended, and we should move forward.
For that, questions, comments, please? Anybody? I mean, just to summarise, I do think, I think our view, and I think the Scrutiny Committee agreed, as you said, Councillor Smith, is that, this original contract was originally created some time ago, and I think it is the right thing now to have 2 separate contracts, but also I think certainly with legislation, particularly regarding climate change and safety like asbestos, it probably is more prudent to have that more directly under direct control of the council, and probably a more flexible way of doing the minor works, which I think everybody agreed was the better way forward. Probably a improved commissioning, a way of commissioning some of these services, because as we know, most of the work, the building work we do outsource to contractors, and I think as things have moved on, it will be the right thing to do. So unless anybody has got any particular questions, comments? Okay, recommendations there on page 59, which basically ask us to approve the procurement of property services as described, and which will also require the insourcing of those places, which I can't remember how many were. There were about 19 posts, I believe, and then delegates as usual to the director in consultation. All those in favour of recommendation agreed? Thank you. That's a unanimous again. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Moving on then, we now go on to review financial performance. So, Michelle, or straight into Michelle.
Straight into me. Thank you very much, Leader. So the report sets out our financial outturn for the financial year 22-23 and the variances against the budget and also the proposed use of those variances to go forward to Council in September. In terms of our revenue budget, the overall underspend on our revenue budget was 12.7 million. This was different to what we reported in Q3. We reported an underspend of 1.6 million there forecast, and the main difference there was around additional Section 31 grant that we received from government around business rates that we hadn't planned for, and also we've been able to offset the overspend on school transport with use of contingency, which significantly impacted on our final balance of underspend. In terms of our capital programme, the net underspend there was 49 million, but it's worth noting that most of the variances on this are due to timing and slippage in some of the delivery of the major schemes rather than project underspends, and that will all get picked up as part of the budget setting process as we move forward. The report also sets out the use of the development fund, and paragraph 1.45 sets out the planned use of the additional money that was put into the development fund as part of the budget setting process. So Council agreed to add 8.7 million into our development fund when they set the budget in February, and the planned use of this is set out in that paragraph, mainly with 7 million being invested in local highway schemes, the remainder in smaller highway schemes and skills and development and public rights of way. The key point in the report is the planned use of carry forward and underspends, and that's set out in Table E on page 119. The revenue underspend of 12.79 after being adjusted for the carry forwards for the directorate areas, which is part of our financial regulation, financial reg approvals, gives a balance of 10 million, and that is effectively proposed to be added to the development fund to be used for emerging council priorities. So I'll finish there and ask for any questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments, please? I mean, a healthy position, I suppose, to be in compared to most other councils. Can I just check, we had no indication then this extra money was coming in from government, just to be clear, why, you know, because that's obviously a substantial part of this underspend. So, but we just had no clue this was going to be coming.
No, so when we set our budget on the funding side, we're very much reliant on the information we get from the districts as the billing authorities around the collection of council tax and business rates, and we use that information to set the budget. Obviously, the government have been providing some support to small business, and that grant came as compensation for the reduction in the collection that the districts will have received, but we weren't aware of that when we set the budget.
Thank you. And in terms of the recommendation there, of course, we are, just to remind people that what happens is that the decision the final decision will be at the full council in September. So our job is to send a recommendation to the full council. So the sort of pragmatic situation at the moment is to put it into the reserves, but obviously I'm sure there'll be a healthy debate at full council how what we should do with this money. And as I said, I think most councils are debating how they will fund their in-year deficit. So it's a good place to be in, but it really would be helpful if we had more certainty from government that the money we get, some advance warning. But I suspect we're in, and similar arrangements could happen next year for all we know. Okay, Councillor Davies.
Thank you. Just to kind of echo that, I think the other thing we need to be cognizant of is that next couple of years there may be a change in Westminster, so the whole funding formula could be out. So a little bit of a war chest is not a bad thing as we approach that, because you only have to look at the headlines from other local authorities. They're talking about some really quite drastic in-year changes and savings and slashing budgets and things. So this is a good place, but I look forward to the debate in September as to what we do with what monies we do have some flexibility about.
I think also we should congratulate the officers, because obviously there are pressures, particularly in children and adults, and part of the success, although we haven't, we've had to put more in contingency, haven't we? But we managed to keep a lid on those those extra costs, and as Councillor Davies says, and I think as Andrew Crookham has said before, the current government's view is that they will be requiring savings after, and whichever government's in place whenever the next general election happens, that they will have some very difficult challenges financially, and they're all sort of making noises about what they might do and what they might spend. But I think I think it's a fair certainty that local government will once again be expected to be at the forefront of helping save money nationally. Okay, any further questions, comments, please? Okay, thank you for that. So recommendations there on page, I've lost it. Here we are. That's on page 93, which basically, as you say, the carry forwards, which has been described by Michelle, and then as the council policy is that underspends will be carried forward, but we won't be carrying forward the overspends, which will be helpful to the fire and rescue and police. And then obviously we note the financial performance and also transfer 8.7 million to the development fund for future consideration. All those in favour of those recommendations? Thank you. Again, that's agreed. Nobody against. So that's great. Thank you very much. So move on to the final paper then, which is Corporate Plan Success Framework Q4. Caroline.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so the report outlines the performance of the corporate plan priorities at the end of Q4, so that's March 2023. In terms of the corporate plan, we have 35 activities that we're reporting, and all of those are progressing as planned, so a really positive picture in relation to the activities. So in terms of the KPIs, there are 31 that we are reporting in this report. 71% of those are either exceeding or achieving their target. Of the 5 key performance indicators that are exceeding their target in Q3, 3 of those, we were reporting as well in Q3. There are 2 measures relating to waste and also the measure relating to customer levels of satisfaction. The 2 new measures, so those that we're reporting as exceeding for the first time in Q4, relate to the number of children in care per 10,000 population. Again, a challenging target that we have amended in year due to the challenging circumstances, but again, we remain in a very strong position in relation to our children per 10,000 population and comparably to our national comparators as well. The other new measure is actually relating to the final published academic achievement data. So this is released in earlier part of this year and obviously comes to committee for the first time now. It seems at odds when children and young people are sitting examinations now, but obviously this is final published data from summer 2022. The percentage of pupils achieving grade 5 or above in English and Maths at GCSE shows at 47.4%, which is above the target that we set. The other 7 measures reported in Q4 that achieved the ambition set, the differences in Q3 were we're now reporting for the first time PIs 29, which relate to road maintenance. All of those are achieving their target. We also have the percentage of eligible 2-year-olds in receipt of their early years entitlement and the percentage of 3- and 4-year-olds who are taking up their universal entitlement also achieving their target. All of the other measures listed were achieving in Q3 and remain so in Q4. All of our contextual measures, so those where we don't set an actual target but executive directors give a RAG rating, are all rated as green. In terms of those that are not achieving their targets, there are 6 of the same measures that weren't achieving in Q3, so those that we've discussed previously around waste, good and outstanding in schools, and our sickness absence. Our contacts resolved at early resolution continues to be a focus, and we are adjusting the target for the 23-24 framework to be more realistic given the short amount of time we do have to make an early resolution, but still remain a focus of this being our priority. There are 3 new measures in Q4 that aren't achieving their target, and they all relate to academic achievement data. So 2 of those around the good level of development in early years. So that's the percentage of children achieving a good level of development, and also the achievement gap between Lincolnshire pupils eligible for free school meals and their peers, so non-eligible free school meals. Obviously, these measures were impacted by COVID and the closure of nursery provision, as well as a new assessment framework in 2021, where we often see through a new assessment framework lower levels of achievement. The final measure relates to the percentage of pupils reaching the expected standard in reading, writing, maths at Key Stage 2. Again, impacted by COVID and the loss of learning through those earlier years. And this hasn't just been seen by Lincolnshire, but also nationally. In Appendix B, you'll see the proposed corporate plan success framework for 23-24, so those measures and activities that we will bring to you for next year. all of the targets set in the 23-24 framework have all now have portfolio approval. Hopefully that's a quick summary, and I'll hand over for questions.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Leader. Just to add on to a bit to that, I think the excuse me, the recycling rate, again, I think that is impacted by the fact that all of our districts, as I've said in OSMB many times, they don't yet have the cardboard rollout, and that's part of the new formula. So I think that will balance itself out, to be honest, to a certain degree. There are other parts in the involving waste which have changed and gone on to target around recycling rates at centres, and I think, again, that's to do with the summer waste and garden waste, but although it's not hitting target, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it actually means people may be generating less waste in the first place. But the biggest one, as has already been alluded to, is the educational attainment, which we have, unfortunately, very little control over, because they're either academised or it's through the Regional Schools Commissioner. And the Brooking grant we used to have, as Heather will know, we no longer do. So our role has diminished in that sense, which is obviously a frustration when things aren't going quite how we'd like. But we are where we are, and we do what we can, Leader. But that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McNally and Councillor Davis. Councillor McNally, do you want to talk about waste? And obviously, some of you. Oh, Councillor Davis, you want to talk about waste, do you? Apparently.
Well, perhaps wasted opportunity. Heather will be thrilled to see me reaching for the microphone, but I would just build on the comments I made when we previously looked at this, when we talked about education. I was very grateful for Children's Services time to look at this in more detail, and it's clear, I think, as Councillor Smith's alluded to, that, you know, performance in Lincolnshire isn't where it should be in terms of expectation for children, and that's despite the very good efforts of the team here, who are hamstrung by legislation and, you know, perhaps a regional setup that doesn't care quite as much as the team here, and I know many parents would do. And I wonder whether or not we ought to start looking to push for a change into structures so that we do have the control that people expect us to, because it's clearly obvious, despite that, I think is there a year's delay in the figures being processed. I'd be interested to know what the kind of the foresight draft looks like coming forward, that COVID and lockdown was a disaster for children. The numbers are stark, but also we don't have the levers I think we should have, and rightly the public expect us to, so that, you know, that Heather's team can actually start doing something about this, because we are in danger of seeing kind of a cohort of children, and I've seen this at primary schools that are struggling, where you know, one bad teacher, for example, or one bad year, you can follow that in the statistics through their entire kind of primary school and onto secondary school experience, and we're going to see this carry on through, and it needs substantial and dramatic intervention, and it needs the control resting back, and maybe devolution is an opportunity to do this, Leader, but I do think it's something we need to take up really seriously.
Thank you. I mean, I think there is a general issue there, and I think you're right, because some of these targets are waste, and they are national targets, which we then sort of replicate, and it is, and a lot, and adult care, social care services is another one, where it's not just us who have to deliver on these, and we are measured, obviously we have, adult care, we're having a review there, external review, ongoing, and again they'll be asking, I'm sure, what about this, that and the other, and some of it will be stuff beyond our control, so they're really expecting us to somehow magically influence, and I think we have a reasonably good record on that. And this morning apparently the government's going to be launching its offlog website, or so again that I think we are sort of marching back to having lot more inspections, and a lot of those will be not just on what we do and won't take account of any funding disparities, but I think there is an issue there, and I think on the waste I was going to ask about whether we have this conversation about, well, my view is that we have 4% non-recycling. The way the government measures this, it's 50%, which is a nonsense. So I just think there is an issue there, how we measure and how we just measure what we can totally control and what we can influence, but I just don't know whether, I think there's an issue brewing now, and I think Councillor Davis is right. Yeah. Heather?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I mean, obviously, I think that the frustration around the kind of mixed system, we've rehearsed quite a lot here, and I think everybody's really clear on what we do have powers to intervene on. In terms of the projections, Councillor Davies, what we do know is that the exam boards have been really clear that this year's exams will see a return to even higher expectations. So the adjustments that we'd had at A-level and GCSE for the last 2 years since COVID to account for the missed education have been removed. So the children sitting their A-levels and GCSEs this year are back to the expectations pre-COVID. So we think that will have some effect. And I think you're absolutely right. COVID and the closure of schools has had an impact on children and young people, and we've had papers here where we've argued that actually it had a disproportionate effect on children and young people, and the recovery is going to take a long time. The government is investing in the COVID recovery plan, but again, that funding goes directly to schools, and the schools are delivering that COVID recovery. And we don't get projections. Again, it's the change in relationship comes into play here. We used to gather projections for how children might do. We don't do that now. We have no powers to ask, and we have no funding to have a team of people that collates all of that information for the children of Lincolnshire. So in terms of predicting it, other than the intelligence we've got from our locality advisors in the maintained schools, we don't have that level of detail currently.
Yes, I mean, and it's very disappointing because also projections is where you can, in the past, we identified issues, and then early intervention is it's too late once there's there's a problem with exams or what have you, or indeed with a school, and those levers have gone, and I don't know where we'll get to, but it's an issue, and difficult to measure as well.
Thank you. Just really again to highlight that as we know, the Offlog website launched last night, and we've now been given the performance indicators that they intend to use in order to be able to benchmark local authorities. It's going to focus very much around waste, around adult care and finance, but I think actually taking the point that you were raising, Leader, around what performance indicators are meaningful for Lincolnshire, I think we maybe need to critically appraise what they're currently proposing, and then really challenge that back if we don't feel that they're right for Lincolnshire.
Thank you. I mean, I think, as long as it's done in the right way, I don't think anybody could disagree with having, being able to compare yourselves with others, and I don't think anybody would disagree with the fact that there are certain councils, well known nationally, who frankly have mismanaged their finances to an almost incredible degree. So one can understand why the government would want to have more reassurance directly what's going on. I think they did rely on auditors, and again, that doesn't seem to have worked very well in some cases. So you can understand, and I don't think we should begrudge that, but there needs to be a fair measurement, doesn't there? And it needs to be something we could all accept, because inevitably we will be compared to, on a website, there'll be somebody who comes top and there'll somebody who comes bottom, and government says that won't happen, but inevitably it will, I think. And what about the scoring? Is that there was a lot of discussion about there won't be scores, but I'm not sure how what we've seen of the website so far. Will you'll be ranked somehow? Will you be ranked in clumps, or will it be one at the top and number 300 and something at the bottom? I don't know.
Offlog are saying that they don't want it to behave as a league table, but I think human nature is that we'll all look at the performance indicators and almost put everybody into a league table, and I'm sure that that's how it will be perceived across the sector as well.
Okay, good. Right, so back to, and yes, Councillor McNally.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just going back to what you said, I think some of the things like the recycling rate, the household waste recycling, so really should be a measure, because we've got a performance indicator, but we can't control what people bring in, and the national performance indicators. There's quite a few councils within the country that don't meet the 50% target. The ones that are higher, they're unitary authorities. They have different collection, or that let's say I'll just give an example of Birmingham. I don't know what it is, but it's in a city. There's lorries that go around and they collect every single item all separately. You know, realistically, Lincolnshire can't do that. It's limited because of its rurality. So, you know, there's things possibly that we can do. I mean, ultimately, we've got 3% to landfill, which is absolutely great. The amount of waste being produced is going down, which is great. You know, there's some things to work on, but ultimately, I think it's more of a good news story than a bad news.
Yeah, I think overall it is a very good news story, and most of the targets have been met. I mean, is it fair to say that, what about the direction of travel, Caroline, in terms of where, well, all of them, but particularly the ones where we're not quite hitting the mark?
I don't have that information right to hand. I mean, I just was going to pick up the point as well around...
Just in general terms, your feeling?
Certainly from speaking to Mike, we're continuing to see that positive impact in terms of, like say, the amount to landfill is very, very low.
I mentioned general terms, not
across the whole of the corporate
the feeling,
priorities.
or perhaps I should ask the Chief Executive direction. I'll hand over to the Chief Exec's direction of travel, Chief Exec, of all measures, but particularly the ones where we're not quite hitting the mark.
Yeah, so on the whole, I think really positive news story in terms of what we're delivering, and on the whole positive news story in terms of those areas that we do need to improve on. I think the area that stands out is the children's services, which obviously we've had a bit of a discussion and a debate around the lack of the lack of levers in those areas. So in terms of looking at the performance indicators across the board that we choose to put into the success framework in order to measure what's important to us, I think it's the education ones that are probably most stubborn to be able to get movement, but I think all the others we are seeing traction on.
Actually, when now we're getting more detail on offlog, obviously there'll have to be some synergy, won't there? But I mean, I think I'm quite happy to, if it's just offlog doesn't make sense for us, we need to be saying so and explaining. I don't think we need to be chasing targets, for example, waste. You know, everybody in the rural areas are going to have their bins collected 4 times. You know, it's just nonsense, isn't it? I think we should be honest about that.
Yeah, so we got those last night, so just starting to do some work to map them and what they mean for us. So I'm sure that in the next iteration of the success framework, we'll be able to be in a position to make some recommendations to the executive on that.
Okay, Councillor Betroyd.
Thank you, Leader. Although we've already indicated that sickness and absent rates are falling and they still remain to be falling, we're hoping that our next set of figures will take us below the target. That's what we're thinking at the moment. You can never guarantee that, but we are drilling down into what the issues are around that and what the major ones are, and majority fall under the bracket of mental health. So we are looking at that. Obviously that covers a wide range of possible illnesses and sickness reasons, but yeah, we're definitely looking through that, and what I've asked Tony to do is look through our support, what we're offering, how we can make that better, and how we can try to get people back and give them support that they need to be back at work, which is, you know, best for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further comments, questions? Very good. Recommendations there on page 175. So we note the reports, and obviously we also accept the recommendations of the scrutiny committee. So all agreed, please show. Thank you. Thank you, that's unanimous again. And with that, that concludes the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.